Imagine waking up to a world that is uncertain, where headlines scream of violence, diseases spread without warning, and the foundations of life feel increasingly fragile. You step into your day not knowing what news will break, what battles you'll face, or what burdens may weigh on your soul. Yet in the middle of this chaos, there is a place, a sacred place, where fear loses its grip and peace reigns. Psalm 91 is not just a collection of comforting words. It is a divine promise, a spiritual fortress offered by God Himself. It is the quiet assurance that no matter what surrounds you, you are not alone, not unprotected, not forgotten. It is the whisper of heaven declaring that the Most High has you hidden under His shadow, and when the battle comes, and it will, the Lord will fight for you. This morning, I invite you not just to hear these words, but to step into them, to believe again, to trust again, to pray with confidence, because when you abide in Him, no enemy can reach you without going through Him first. And that, my friend, is where your strength for today truly begins. Psalm 91 is more than a poetic passage. It is a divine covenant wrapped in language that speaks directly to the heart of every believer. When we speak of it as a covenant of protection, we must understand that it is not merely wishful thinking or comforting literature. It is God's own assurance to those who belong to Him, trust in Him, and dwell with Him. The psalm begins with an invitation to dwell in the secret place of the Most High. And it is there that the covering begins. The word dwell is crucial here. It does not suggest a temporary visit or an occasional prayer. It calls for abiding, a continuous nearness, an intimacy that becomes the rhythm of one's life. In that secret place, the soul is not just heard by God, it is held, shielded, and saturated with His presence. The promises of Psalm 91 are not cast upon the general population. They are reserved for the one who chooses to make the Lord their refuge. This is not a mechanical or superstitious faith where simply quoting verses guarantees results. It is about relationship, about knowing the heart of God so deeply that His voice becomes your guiding light in the shadows. When the psalmist speaks of deliverance from the snare of the fowler or protection from deadly disease, he's using imagery that reveals the vulnerability of humanity. The fowler sets traps skillfully, often in silence, in hidden places. And yet the promise is that the Lord sees what we do not. He delivers not just from visible danger, but from traps we didn't even know were laid. Likewise, pestilence refers to what spreads quietly, often unnoticed until it causes chaos. And again, the covenant assures that we will be shielded not because of our strength or intelligence, but because of our nearness to God. The covenant is not based on man's ability to predict or plan. It is based on God's ability to protect beyond human comprehension. What makes this promise all the more profound is the character of the one who gives it. God is not a man who breaks His word or offers comfort without action. He is a fortress not only in theory but in reality. He is a refuge not just in religious thought but in the experience of those who trust Him. To dwell in the secret place is to enter a realm where divine intervention becomes your normal expectation. The covenant does not exempt you from battle, but it secures you in the midst of it. Just as a house may shake during the storm, but remain standing due to its foundation, so the soul, anchored in the promises of Psalm 91, may be pressed, but will not be broken. In this covenant of protection, we find not only the promise of safety, but the very heart of a God who watches over His own with unwavering commitment. The words refuge and fortress used in Psalm 91 are not accidental. They are deliberate pictures drawn from ancient realities. A refuge was a place someone would run to when they were in danger. A shelter that shielded from immediate harm. A fortress, on the other hand, was a stronghold, built not just to hide in, but to withstand siege. and to protect over time. When the psalmist calls God our refuge and fortress, he is not suggesting a God who is far removed from human struggle. He is declaring that God is intimately involved in our defense in a world that offers temporary and fragile securities, bank accounts, influence, popularity, relationships. The psalm directs our gaze to something, or rather someone, who does not change when the pressure rises. This refuge is not an escape from life, but a place where the believer can breathe in the midst of it. To know God as your refuge is to walk into chaos with confidence that you are not alone. It is not the absence of trial that makes one secure, but the presence of the Almighty in the midst of it. The fortress speaks of strength, unshakable and immovable. In ancient times, fortresses were surrounded by thick walls, difficult to penetrate, strategically located on high ground. That is the image the psalmist chooses to describe the presence of God. Not a weak place, not a temporary shelter, but a stronghold that nothing can overthrow. So often in life we attempt to build our own fortresses. We try to construct safety using our knowledge, reputation, or influence. But every man-made shelter eventually gives way. When sickness knocks on the door, when a loved one passes, when anxiety robs the night of peace, human-built walls begin to tremble. It is then that we discover the truth of the psalm. God as our fortress means we are safe, not because we are strong, but because He is. To trust Him as both refuge and fortress is to rest in the confidence that no matter how fierce the storm, His covering is sure. This double image of a place to run to and a place to stand within shows the complete nature of God's protection. He gives comfort in the moment of panic and strength for the long battle. He doesn't only shelter us for a brief escape, He holds us so securely that we can remain even in the presence of threat. This is not about avoiding the realities of life. It's about facing them while being held in something stronger. The fortress is not a place we build, it is who He is. The more we dwell in Him, the more unshakable our peace becomes. Psalm 91 gives us not just poetic comfort, but powerful truth that in a world of collapsing structures, God remains our sure and everlasting stronghold. The phrase, "The Lord will fight for you," is one of the most comforting and powerful truths found in Scripture. It echoes through Psalm 91, not in direct wording, but in every assurance it offers. That when the enemy schemes, when disease spreads, when terror stalks in darkness, the believer is not left to fend for themselves. God does not simply watch from a distance. He engages on behalf of His own. The spiritual life is not a call to passive retreat, nor is it a call to frantic striving. It is a call to trust the One who steps into the battlefield for His children. The imagery of a warrior God may seem foreign to some, but throughout the pages of the Bible, it is consistently revealed that God intervenes where man is helpless. He fights battles that are too complex for human strategy, too dark for human strength, too overwhelming for human courage. To understand that God fights for us is to surrender the illusion of control. It is to admit that our intellect, our plans, and our physical energy have limits. But God's strength has no ceiling. When Psalm 91 speaks of deliverance from traps and deadly disease, it is not saying you will never encounter opposition. It is saying you will never face it alone. Every believer will walk through seasons of difficulty, but those who dwell in the secret place of the Most High do so with a defender who never sleeps, never weakens, and never loses. There are moments in life when you reach the end of your own strength. That is where the might of God begins to move. When the enemy comes in like a flood, it is the Spirit of the Lord that raises a standard against him. This is not poetic exaggeration, but divine reality. To say that the Lord will fight for you is to place your life in the hands of a God who does not delegate your protection to chance. He goes before you, He surrounds you, and He stands behind you. In moments when you feel paralyzed by fear, He is already at work in realms you cannot see. His fight is not only against external forces, but also internal ones: anxiety, despair, temptation, and the weight of guilt. He wages war against every lie that tries to define your identity apart from Him. In this promise is also a call to stillness. Sometimes the greatest act of faith is not running, shouting, or fixing, but standing still and knowing that the battle belongs to the Lord. It's the discipline of trusting in silence while God moves in strength. When you understand that God fights for you, you begin to walk differently. Fear loses its grip, worry starts to unravel, and peace becomes more than a concept. It becomes a reality grounded in divine presence. The battle may be fierce, but the outcome is not in doubt. The Lord, mighty in battle, fights for His own. The morning is not just a time on the clock. It is a sacred threshold, a spiritual doorway into the unknown. Every day begins with choices, thoughts, and attitudes that can shape the course of all that follows. In Psalm 91, the assurance of protection and divine involvement is rooted in a life that remains close to God. And that closeness begins with intentional surrender. Morning prayer is not simply a religious habit. It is an act of alignment. A moment where the soul, still uncluttered by the noise of the day, draws near to its source. It is where fears are named, hopes are whispered, and burdens are placed into divine hands. The silence of the early hour makes room for the still small voice of God, and in that sacred conversation, strength begins to rise. A day without prayer is a day lived in your own strength. You may not feel it in the beginning, but the weight will make itself known. Anxiety, confusion, reaction instead of response, all these are signs of a soul walking without its compass. But when you begin your day by seeking the presence of God, you are acknowledging that you cannot navigate it alone. You are placing the day with all its uncertainty and potential under the covering of the Almighty. That simple act of surrender changes everything. It does not remove difficulty, but it positions your heart to face it with peace and clarity. Morning prayer is not about lengthy or eloquent words. It is about honesty. It is about coming before God and saying, I give you this day. Lead me, fight for me, protect me, use me. The psalmist writes of angels being commanded concerning you, of protection from unseen dangers, of a covering that shields even in the most threatening circumstances. These promises are not unlocked by routine, but by relationship. And relationship grows with time, with consistency, with presence. The morning is a gift, an open invitation to start again, to reset the heart, to remember what truly matters. When you begin your day in the presence of God, it sets a tone for the decisions you will make, the thoughts you will allow, and the peace you will carry. It is in these early moments that fears begin to dissolve, not because the threats have disappeared, but because your heart has been reminded of who holds the day. You start to see not just with natural eyes, but with spiritual perspective. That person who wronged you becomes an opportunity for grace. That decision you dread becomes a space for trust. That diagnosis, that delay, that disappointment, they no longer define your day because your morning was defined by communion with the one who holds all things. Morning prayer is not just a beginning. It is an anchoring. It takes your eyes off the chaos and lifts them to the throne. And in that act of surrender, the Lord begins to fight for you long before you even know a battle has begun. Psalm 91 does not shy away from the presence of danger. Rather, it acknowledges it openly and directly. The psalmist speaks of the terror by night, the arrow that flies by day, the pestilence that walks in darkness, and the destruction that lays waste at noonday. These are not metaphorical embellishments. They are real descriptions of the kinds of fears that stalk the human heart. Fear is the invisible thread that weaves its way through life's uncertainties, often arriving uninvited and settling deep within. It doesn't always wear the face of physical danger. Sometimes it appears as the fear of rejection, failure, loss, loneliness, or the unknown. The promises of Psalm 91 stand in direct contrast to this inner war. They offer faith not as a passive hope, but as an active shield. The entire passage is a call to trust, a deep, deliberate, daily trust in the one who sees what we cannot and protects when we are unaware of what threatens us. Fear is relentless. It feeds on what-ifs and worst-case scenarios. It thrives in silence and isolation, in moments when faith seems thin. And yet, Psalm 91 answers fear with clarity. It reminds us that our lives are not exposed to the world's chaos without cover. The Lord commands his angels concerning those who walk with him. He becomes a refuge, not just a metaphorical idea, but a present reality, the shield of faith. It's not a poetic phrase. It is a spiritual truth meant to be lifted daily. Fear seeks to dominate the imagination, but faith reorients the heart toward truth. What we fear the most often reveals where we trust God the least, and Psalm 91 becomes the training ground for that trust to be tested and strengthened. Faith does not mean we never feel fear. It means we do not let fear have the final word. The believer who walks with God may feel the chill of fear brush against their soul, but they are not ruled by it. They are reminded that 1,000 may fall at their side and 10,000 at their right hand, but it shall not come near them. That is not arrogance, it is assurance. Assurance born from relationship, not circumstance. Faith pushes back against fear, not with force, but with truth. It chooses to remember what God has said over what fear suggests. The enemy uses fear to paralyze, but God uses faith to empower. There is a hidden battle waging every day in the heart of the believer, the battle between fear and faith. Psalm 91 equips us to face that battle armed not with denial, but with divine promise. It tells us that while fear may knock, it does not have to enter. While fear may shout, it does not get to define. The one who dwells in the secret place chooses faith even when fear is loud. That choice transforms not only the mind but the path of the entire day. For where faith is present, peace will follow. Psalm 91 opens with a powerful phrase, "He who dwells in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty." It is not a call to occasional devotion or surface-level faith, but to deep, ongoing intimacy with God. The word dwells implies a continual staying, a living in, not a quick visit or a momentary prayer and crisis. Intimacy with God is not about religious routine, but about the posture of the heart. It is in the secret place, hidden from the noise of the world, where the soul learns to listen, to love, and to lean on the presence of the Almighty. Without that place of intimacy, we seek authority without foundation, strength without source, and protection without presence. The promises of Psalm 91, deliverance, protection, angelic charge, victory, are not randomly scattered. They are relationally given. They flow from closeness, not from distance. God's protection is not a blanket policy. It is a covenant offered to those who walk closely with Him. The authority to walk without fear, to resist the enemy, to speak in faith is born out of intimacy. Without dwelling in the presence of God, our faith becomes mechanical, our prayers become empty words, and our peace becomes easily shaken. But when we dwell, when we remain, something shifts. God doesn't just become our refuge, He becomes our reality. There is a pattern throughout Scripture where authority is entrusted to those who first learn to remain close. Moses spoke with God face to face before he led a nation. David worshipped in the field before he conquered in the battlefield. Jesus withdrew to pray before he moved in power. The secret place is the womb of authority. It is where courage is birthed, where discernment is sharpened, and where spiritual clarity is restored. Without it, we begin to operate in our own strength, and the results will always fall short of what God desires. But in the secret place where we dwell, we are not just protected, we are transformed. Psalm 91 shows us that God responds to those who love Him, know His name, and call on Him. Those are relational terms, not religious duties. To know His name is to know His nature. To love Him is to seek Him with a whole heart. To call on Him is to trust Him, not just when things are falling apart, but before they do. The secret place is not built in public, it is developed in private. It is where we learn to depend not on our surroundings, but on His Spirit. Out of that intimacy comes unshakable authority, the kind that causes peace to reign even in the middle of chaos. That is what Psalm 91 offers. A life that is covered, a heart that is anchored, and a soul that is fully alive under the shadow of the Almighty. Intimacy with God is not optional for those who want to walk in spiritual victory. It is essential. As we stand at the threshold of a new day, Psalm 91 reminds us that we do not walk into it alone, unarmed or unguarded. The God who commands the heavens also commands His angels concerning you. The Lord who parted seas and silenced storms still speaks peace over your life. He is your refuge when the winds rise, your fortress when the battle rages, your covering when fear whispers. This is not poetic comfort. It is divine reality for those who choose to dwell in the secret place of the Most High. So let this be more than a morning prayer. Let it be your declaration. The Lord will fight for you. He will protect you, guide you, carry you, and even when danger approaches or uncertainty threatens, remember this: the shadow of the Almighty is not cast by distance but by nearness. Stay close, stay still, stay surrendered, because the one who watches over you neither slumbers nor fails. Begin your day not with worry, but with worship, not with fear, but with faith. For when God is your dwelling place, every step is shielded, every moment is sacred, and every battle is already in the hands of the one who has never lost.